If you want something done right, you do it yourself. Unless you're too old, in which case you use time travel and get a younger version of you to do it. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Tales of Showcase, where we'll take a DeLorean over a pool of blood any day. I'm your host, the Watcher of New Earth. Thor's Day returns as we continue the badassery of the God Butcher story arc. If you're just joining us, for Thor's sake, try and keep up next time. The God Butcher story is told in 3 different eras. In the past, we join a young, arrogant Thor as he faces the God Butcher for the first time. Last issue, we left off with young Thor being trapped by the Butcher in a cave. In the present, we follow Thor as he searches for the Butcher by following the trail of victims. Last issue ended with Thor revisiting the cave the Butcher kept him in and discovering a new god. And in the far future, an old Thor is the last god in Asgard as he fights a seemingly never-ending battle with the Butcher's minions. And now that we're all up to speed, let's get started. This is Thor, God of Thunder, number 4.
As darkness comes over me, as all pain fades, I feel myself floating. There is no pain, you are receding. A distant ship smoke on the horizon.
We open in the future as old Thor is carried by the Berserkers after a fight.
I feel myself floating on, but I am not dismayed. I go with a glad heart. I go to be with my family. At long last, I go to hell.
Hello, family. I told you I'd see you in hell.
Asgard deserved better. It deserved a better king.
In hindsight, maybe Loki wasn't that bad an idea.
I was always more suited to swinging a hammer than I was to wearing a crown. Ultimately, I wasn't fit to hold either.
No kidding. I mean, I figured you'd probably be a sucky king, but even your hammer eventually left you to be with your ex-girlfriend.
I lived far too long. That was my greatest mistake.
I always thought I'd live fast, die young, leave a hunky Australian corpse.
To Thor's dismay, it turns out he hasn't died, but rather he was being returned to his broken throne. In the present, Thor talks to the creature in the cave. His name is Shadrach, and he apparently was the god of wine and waterfalls. Gore the God Butcher arrived on his planet and slaughtered Shadrach's friends, but for whatever reason he let Shadrach live, even cutting off his eyelids so he had no choice but to watch the butchering. Gods are such beautiful creatures. I've never been more sure of that, because I've seen what they look like on the inside. Methinks that Shadrach is a few Jedi short of having a full council, if you get my drift. Thor asks Shadrach where Gore might be, but Thor only says Kronux and then his fear silences him. Unfamiliar with the word, Thor sets out and tells Shadrach that if he comes with him, no harm shall befall him. Knowing Thor's track record for saving people in this series, I'd stay in the cave. Thor and Shadrach arrive at Omnipotent City, hoping to learn more about Kronux. However, they find the librarian heavily beaten on the floor. They turn and Shadrach says that he wishes he could close his eyes. Can't he still cover his eyes with his hands? And what is it that they turn to find? The scene fades into black and into the past. Wake up, God of Thunder. Now is not the time for sleep.
That comes later.
We're back in the past as young Thor and Gore reenact a scene from 50 Shades Darker. The Butcher plans on torturing Thor until he reveals the whereabouts of Asgard. Thor struggles against the chains, but Gore assures him that they've held gods the size of mountains before. Well, if they can fit Thor, those must have been some pretty small mountains. In the present, Thor realizes the Berserkers have come to hide information on Kronux. In the future, old Thor refuses to stay down and crawls his way to another battle, striking a huge blow with his hammer. This leads to a pretty cool shot showing what Thor is doing in each era. In the present, the librarian asks Shadrach if he could put out the fire. However, Shadrach says that he is only the god of songs and somersaults. Wait, earlier he said he was the god of wine and waterfalls. You can't just flip-flop on this thing. Thor tells the librarian that the book burned up, but he had already read enough. He flies off to Kronux, which actually turns out to be a planet. And he leaves Shadrach behind. Way to bring him out into the open and leave him unprotected. Prick. Meanwhile, on Kronux, the Berserkers are busy killing every god and bleeding them into a pool. As you do. The Butcher asks if this will be enough blood, and the last god in Kronux says it will be. He also says that he can assure Gore's survival from this trip. A few drops of our own sacred blood were all we ever used to travel the timeways. You guys use blood to time travel? I thought time turners were a pain. As he steps into the pool, we see our first glimpse of the God Butcher in the present day. He seems to have ditched the open cloak from before and instead opted for a slightly more conservative robe. Either he's feeling cold today, or he just really got self-conscious about his body in the last couple millennia. And in the future, Thor once again falls at the hands of the Butcher's Berserkers. He yells at them to end it, and suddenly there's a big flash. And our comic ends with the arrival of present-day Thor. Wow. Talk about a Deus Ex Machina. I mean, nothing is more of a cop-out than having another version of you in the same story. Isn't that right, other me? Yep. Yeah! Anyway, jokes aside, this comic is great. Like the previous 3 issues, the writing is fantastic and the art is phenomenal. This issue is particularly important, though, in that it not only advances the plot, but also introduces time travel, which will serve to connect the 3 timelines. At least, I assume that's what's going to happen. I haven't read the next issue. As always, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. This is the Watcher of New Earth, signing off.